Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I am an Episcopal priest, and I live here in Austin, Texas. I've had the gift of recovery since December the 27th, 1972. As you probably know by now, the purpose of these podcasts is to try to go deeper into the history, the spirituality, and in this series, the psychology that I think underlie the 12-step journey. If you are enjoying what you're hearing, please do me a favor, be sure to like, subscribe, tell a friend, and if you're in a position to make a donation, that really helps us keep this operation going, okay? I take no monies from this. This is all a work of love and service on my part, so be generous if you can. It helps us spread the word. This is the third episode of a series that is focused on a book by Jungian analyst Dr. James Hollis. It is titled Living Between Worlds, Finding Resilience in Changing Times. I've put a link to it in the show notes. If you're interested in Hollis, you can start with this book. He's got about 20 books out there. Find one that the title appeals to you. This is the one we're kind of choosing to get going with. I would list him as one of my teachers in terms of people that I've found who really speak to me at a very deep level, and I think he has a sufficiently deep understanding of recovery and the spiritual elements of recovery and the psychological elements of recovery to be of real help to anyone who is on the kind of journey that we are on. In chapter 3 of his book, Hollis tries to answer the question, what is it that depth psychology has to offer us that may be different from other types of psychology that perhaps we're familiar with, okay? So he starts off by reminding us. I'm going to have a fair number of quotes with this episode. He says, psychology as we know it did not exist in the 19th century. This fledgling discipline, born of suffering, first found an unsteady foothold in the acceptable sciences as the study of mind, M-I-N-D. Out of that shaky beginning rose a desperate need to prove itself worthy of inclusion in the academic, medical, and professional world. That deep need haunts psychology to this day and produces an unfortunate splitting, a privileging of empirical tests of value. In other words, things that can be measured, rather than the mythopoetic world in which we actually live. We live in a world of mystery, is what he's saying. We live in a world where transcendence of the mind is possible. But most psychologists are not really comfortable with that. So they're going to limit themselves to this area of study or that area. And psychiatrists more and more today are going to limit themselves to prescribing medicines, psychotropic medicines, psyche medicines, soul medicines, if you will, to treat the symptoms, and then rarely, if ever, do they get down to the causes. So mythopoetic world in which we live. He's saying that our world, the real world, is a world filled with myth and filled with mystery. But let him say it for himself. While well-intended, this shift to the material has so often narrowed and trivialized the human condition, so often concluded that the real is what I can observe and perhaps measure, neglecting the fact that we all swim in mystery and the inexplicable. He's a good writer. Every once in a while he'll use a word. I got to go to the dictionary to look it up, but mythopoetic was new to me, and probably to you as well. But the myth and poetry, these are the things that capture the mystery of life. So, Hollis is saying that psychology started off feeling a bit ashamed of itself, so it began to limit itself to what could be measured rather than addressing the deeper needs of the soul. I'm good friends with a pretty well-known psychologist today. She told me that when she was studying psychology, they advised her, avoid Jung. It's too subjective. You need to study things that can be measured, that rats can help you with in the laboratory. Interestingly, she's getting the Jungian stuff now, and it's really appealing to her. To what? To her soul, which was left out in the study of psychology. That's Hollis's main point here. He continues. Jung noted that psychology developed so late in the 19th century and became the last of the social sciences because the regions it explores were once mediated by tribal myths and the great religions. In other words, if one wished to know what the right course of action was, the big picture, most humans existed in a field of received authorities, perhaps the village shaman or the institution that towered above them. If one suffered unplanned consequences of a personal or transpersonal nature, one need only consult the scriptures, the ancient stories, where it was all laid out before them. Modern depth psychology had to be invented, Jung noted, because those received authorities had progressively lost their power to connect individuals or even the tribe to the transpersonal energies. This transition of authority is still going on in our era and represents the greatest shift of power from the collective to the individual in human history. And then he adds, if the individual can bear it. So Hollis is saying, while we used to look to religion and to myth to get our bearings, to find out where are our maps that can lead us and guide us through life. Where are they? They're missing from the modern age. The myths are changing, and religion has lost its authority. And because of all this, he says, modern depth psychology has to come along to help us. But he warns us, this represents a tremendous shift in power, and most individuals today avoid looking inside, or fewer still brave enough to venture forth on that journey inside. I mean, you got to remember, this is he's basing all of this on Jung, and we have a link to this in the person of Roland Hazard, who went to Jung, an alcoholic, for help. Jung sent him on a spiritual quest, a spiritual journey. And he said, I've tried everything that psychiatry had to offer you. You need something deeper. And my belief is that those of us who are, quote, the real alcoholics, who don't just need a little, dusting off here and there and tidying up, but the real alcoholic whose life depends on finding a spiritual experience, undergoing a psychic change. This is the journey that Roland Hazard was sent upon. And this is the journey that really relates so significantly to the beginnings of Alcoholics Anonymous, because Wilson was influenced by Roland, by some of the people that he helped, and influenced by Jung himself, corresponded with Jung later in the development of the program, said how many people in AA had benefited from his work and how he had as well. He's warning us, because he says that modern depth psychology has had to come along to help us. But we got to be brave enough to enter this world. Okay, and Hollis then asks his readers, what word or concept central to psychology and psychiatry is almost totally missing from our modern treatment modalities? And he answers, it is the word psyche. Psychology, psychiatry, both are based on psyche. Psyche, he writes, is the Greek word for soul, and reminds us that we are finally the animal that desires meaning and suffers its loss, desires meaning and suffers when that meaning is lost or obfuscated, not obvious, not connected to us, not a real part of our lives. And that's what happens to us in addiction. I was very much moved by Viktor Frankl in my first year of sobriety. He was a psychiatrist Jewish doctor in the concentration camps in Germany. What he discovered there, he had suspected it long before, but he saw it firsthand in the camps. He saw that people could live without food and could go periods without water. But they couldn't go very long without meaning. If they lost the purpose for their lives, if they lost a vision, an internal vision that kept them going, that gave them hope, that gave them connection to something beyond their conditions, because their conditions were rotten. They were the worst imaginable. And the reason that helped me so much, Frankl's writings, was because my conditions weren't too swift in the first year of recovery. But I'd read him, and I'd come away from reading a chapter knowing that whatever the hell it was I was putting up with, living at the Salvation Army in downtown Detroit, may have been bad, but his was 1,000 times worse. And within that context, he found meaning and purpose to his life. And he spent the rest of his life when he came out trying to convey this to people, that this is what we have to grab hold of. This is what we have to find. And this is what Roland Hazard was sent by Jung in search of. Go find the meaning and purpose. Go find the psychic change, the psychic reality, the soul reality that will give meaning and purpose to your life. Hollis goes on. Of course, he says, we are a set of behavioral patterns, reflexive, unexamined thought processes, and biological drives. In other words, what the psychologists are studying, we are that, yes. But to limit our approach to the merely observable features of life is a failure of nerve to take on the larger, non-quantifiable, can't be measured, questions of meaning. Depth psychology differs from other forms of the discipline in that it is an effort to approach the whole person, to undertake dialogue with the essential mystery we all embody. We cannot undertake this deepened conversation without engaging the unconscious, that mysterious realm in which so much is hidden to us, yet from which so much keeps spilling into our world. This is the realm of the unmanageability of our lives. This is step one material. I want to stop using. My conscious mind makes itself up, and says, that's it. I'm putting this damn bottle, this drug down. I'm closing that refrigerator, whatever the addiction might be. But I keep right on doing it. My conscious mind weakens, melts, and this unconscious element within myself reaches up out of the basement, out of the depths of my mind, and takes control of my actions. Why do I do the things that I least want to do? Because there's a part of me that's stuck, and that part is unconscious. But he says, Hollis, the problem with the unconscious is that it is unconscious. We can't be aware of it. We cannot address it, he says, directly. But we can track it. We can engage and interpret its manifestations in how our behavioral patterns, he says, our interfering, how it does what we don't want to do ourselves, our affect-laden thoughts, thoughts we have that are emotionally charged. That's one of the ways I know something has taken over my mind. Look at the degree of emotional charging that it has, okay? That's an indication that it's coming not from my conscious mind, but emanating from my unconscious mind. And he says, as well as in the disorders of our soul that manifest in our bodies. You know, we go to the doctor and this hurts, that aches. What do? They're going to give us a pill. Yeah, they're going to find, and that's good. I'm all for it, you know. But in many, many cases, what's ailing us, chronic anxiety, chronic fear, manifestations of the psyche, the soul, that are not being addressed. And it's sending us a message. It goes on. Each of these venues is an aperture, a window. All right. Each of these so-called symptoms is a window into the dynamics of an active psyche, my soul, seeking its own healing. All right. And correcting our diversions, how we are avoiding contact with it. The big book is onto so much here, so much more than I think they even knew when Wilson was writing it. I don't think he had a solid understanding of it, but damn, he was pretty spot on, you know, that the solution is a spiritual solution. This is an illness that manifests physically and it manifests emotionally, but the solution is a spiritual one. It's going inside and connecting to the deepest levels of self. We're more than just our ego minds, what some refer to as our lesser self, our lesser mind. Jung is saying, and Hollis is writing, that there exists within us a greater self, a more whole self. What the big book calls what? The great reality within. And this great reality, call it what you will, and it does get a little fuzzy here. There's no question about it. And it goes by different names. But it has business with us. If we can bear it. If we can bear it. This is hard work. It is hard work. Hollis said at the beginning of his book that he's sometimes accused of focusing too much on what's wrong inside of us, rather than settling for cheap remedies that he says don't really heal. And I'm in agreement with that. You know, little slogans and things are nice and they're helpful, and they have a long tradition within us, within our fellowships, and even going back to the Oxford group from which it all came. They were big on slogans and such. They're helpful. They play a role. But if my recovery is simply based on slogans, and that's about as deep as they go, if it doesn't rhyme, I'm not going to use it or live it or understand it. Well, then you're just going surface deep, hey? He wants to focus on what's wrong inside of us, all right? And in that vein, he explores another word that contains psyche at its root, and that is psychopathology. And he says, strange as it seems, it is when we are sufficiently split off from our souls that the psyche protests and summons us to an accountability. Pathology, what's wrong? What's wrong with the soul? Depth psychology recognizes that the presence of symptoms, and he lists a few, the depression, the anxiety disorders, the self-medication. Often these are an expression of the psyche, a commentary on how our life is going from the soul's perspective. Not doing too well today, Bill. I'm feeling cut off, alienated, disconnected from my own source. I love the phrase, and this has changed with me over the last several years. We are restless, irritable, discontent. I used to think that was awful. Oh, I shouldn't be that way. The hell I shouldn't. It's an indication from my psyche, my soul, my greater personality, the great reality within, that I've gone off course, that I need a change in my direction. While the natural desire of ego consciousness, as well as ordinary treatment modalities, is to remove psychopathology as quickly as possible. Depth psychology respects this invitation to dialogue with our own depths. Thus, we are summoned to ask other questions, different questions, I'd add. He lists some of them. Why has this symptom come to me? Why am I restless, irritable, discontent? What is that about? What does it want from me? The doorbell rings, you go and you answer. The soul sends a message that it's restless, irritable, discontent. Do I go and do I answer it? Or do I just avoid it? Do something different, push it down until it pops up again. What correctives to my course, the course of my life, must I consider? I think for those of us lucky enough to survive hitting bottom, when we look back on it, we often see it as a blessing. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, An opportunity presented to us that wasn't there before, a demand from our soul to change direction, to change course, to correct the course. And I think this is the purpose of the 12 steps, to connect us with this greater power, to correct or remove the things in our lives that separate us from it, and then the last 3 steps, to be directed by it going forward. So this is basic Oxford group understanding of what became our 12 steps. Connection. Steps 1, 2, 3. Connect with our soul. Connect with our inner guide. Get the ego rightly related to that which is greater than itself. 1, 2, 3. Correction. Steps 4 through 9. What are the things in us that keep us separated from a fuller experience of this inner power? So we take our inventory, we share it with another person, We focus on the four absolutes in steps 6 and 7. Make amends. This is the correction phase, clearing up the blockages that get in the way of our right relationship with our inner depths. Am I making sense? I hope so. And then the final one, the final 3 steps, 10, 11, and 12, direction. Being directed, being guided by this power, listening to our souls, if you will. Are they being fed? Are they being nourished? Are we paying attention to them and to their own source, which they are connected to? To quote Hollis once again, depth psychology is an effort to dialogue with ourselves more deeply than ordinary ego consciousness and most treatment modalities plan to go. While I may find that the life, the choices, the values, and the risks that the soul asks of me are challenging, threatening to my security and predictability, what does it say in the 12 and 12? God, I'll become the hole in the donut if I do this. Don't worry. The gift of taking that risk is an experience of meaning. You talk to somebody who's found this, and they've found the solution to the problem of life, the problem of their life, that they've found the meaning and purpose, which is what? Which is to be in service to that which is greater than self. Boy, there it is in a nutshell. Be rightly related to that greater source and to serve it. What does the book say? God is our Father, we are His children. He is the director, we are the actors. All good ideas are simple. This was the triumphant arch, I think it says, through which we passed to freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from living the life of the lesser self. All right, and that's where depth psychology can be of great help to us, all right? Depth psychology understands that the goal of life is not happiness, which is only transiently possible anyhow, but meaning, purpose, which abides. Okay, so how do we begin doing this soul work? Hollis says, in large part, it begins with going deeper into our family of origin. Depth psychology invites us to return and examine what he calls in this chapter our formative experiences. Hollis says these are those primal, internalized stories or interpretations that took us off course, framed our relations to others, and came to own our daily lives. To excavate them is not to dwell on the past, but to realize in what ways the past is still active within us, creating patterns, dictating diversions, diminishing freedom of choice. As William Faulkner observed, he says, the past is not dead. It's not even past. From childhood on, we begin, quote, reading, unquote, the world in our need to adapt, fit in, get our needs met, avoid harm, manage anxiety. In recovery, when we tell our stories, I hate it when someone just starts with the first drink. I love it when they go back to their childhood, what it was like for them growing up. Why was it in so many of our cases that when we discovered alcohol at age 9 or 10 or 15, whatever it might have been, that the inner world is telling us, where the hell has this stuff been all my life, I've been looking for this, all right? Needing this. So the patterns, they get sown in us very young. And so much of the work of depth psychology is going to be going back to the scene of the crime. Oftentimes when I take my inventory, if my response, my emotional response, is disproportionate to the event, I'm pretty clear that what's going on inside me at that moment is not the external event itself. It's a memory of something that's being reenacted in me, that I'm feeling like I'm 5 or 6 years old, maybe even younger, and I'm being threatened. And when I was threatened back then, I didn't have the wherewithal to deal with it. Now, I've got the wherewithal to deal with it, but the emotional charge still gets triggered. And I gotta go back there. And this is why family of origin work, how safe was it growing up? How did I bend myself like a pretzel to gain approval that perhaps never came? This is the inner work that needs to get done. And I know a lot of people in 12-step are going to say, oh, the hell with that. Just do the next right thing. Well, that's okay. It didn't work for me. I had to go back and I had to do some of this deeper inner work. And the Jungian stuff and writers like Hollis, very helpful in getting an understanding of what's the map to this inner world. The masks that I put on, the persona, the parts I try to hide from myself, the shadow. What are these things? How are they still operational within me, even after 50 some odd years in recovery? It's not like they go away, and I don't know that they're ever fully healed. I just know that they demand attention, and they demand my inner healing. And yes, outward activities can be very, very helpful in doing that, but venturing further when the time is right to go into the inner world, that's when folks like Hollis and stuff can be really, really helpful. At this point, I was going to share an example of this to maybe help you grasp it. So kind of talking about family of origin and things that happened to me younger in life. I'm going to take a pretty simple one. I'm a doer, right? And I'm a compulsive doer. I'm driven in my doing. And I often feel there's never enough that I've done. Could have done more. Well, where the hell does this come from? So I started tracking it. And I'm not saying it goes completely back to this, and this was a traumatic event in my life, but it was certainly indicative of this feeling being there, even at age 6 and 7. And I was in the first grade. And at the end of the summer, I was in Catholic school, and we were supposed to then clean up the classroom. We were supposed to take all of the things that were on the windowsill and all of that and take it to the closet. And the nun would be there, and then she'd put it away so it didn't get dusty, and the janitors could come in and clean up all the peanut butter and jelly smell that infested all of the wood in the classroom, And so I remember this clearly. I was trying to look at, where's this drivenness coming from? And I remember this event. And I'm carrying an exceptionally large load of material, boxes, whatever the hell it was, And I'm bringing them to the nun. And I'm saying, oh, isn't she going to say, oh, Bill, you're such a good boy. Look at what you're doing here. Such a high stack you've got. Why, it's 3 times higher than the other kids, And I get a nice little pat on the head. Instead, what she says is, oh, Billy, you've got a lazy man's load. A lazy man's load. I think it was an Irish expression. What it meant was not that you don't have enough. It's that you're trying to carry too much. And rather than being a normal size, you're trying to do it instead of 3 trips, you're trying to do it in 1. But what do you think in the mind of a 6, 7-year-old kid? What did that mean to me? Meant to me, there's never enough. Jesus, I got 10 boxes here. Other kids got 5, 4, 3. I got 10. And still, I'm a lazy man's load. That's the kind of stuff that gets recorded at some very deep level of the unconscious and festers there. And then it comes up in later life where it's never enough. You're never doing enough. And the way you identify these is the power, the strength of them. It's different from a normal thought. It's emotionally charged. Okay? That's what depth psychology is hopefully going to help us recognize, identify these stuck parts within ourselves that emanate from the unconscious mind and that I'm not really aware of. Hollis writes, so the reading of our life patterns tells us much about the formative stories, the early stories, to which our lives have been in service, brings them to consciousness, and provides an opportunity for larger, better stories to enhance our journeys. If we change only the behavior and ignore its charged locus, its center in our unconscious, then the early story will only migrate into a new venue, a different relationship, a recurring dilemma. Repeat the patterns over and over again. These emotionally charged stories or complexes. That's what Jung called these emotionally charged areas of our lives. He termed them complexes. They're splinter personalities, he says. This is Hollis. Fractal scripts, partial scripts, and somatic presences, physical presences. We feel it in our stomachs. We recoil when we're presented once again with these emotionally charged feelings. He says, until the core perception or idea that generates the undesirable behavior, the avoidance, the self-defeating compliance is identified, challenged, and worked with over time, the psyche, the soul, stays stuck. It stagnates, and suffering persists. So how do we dialogue with the unconscious? Hollis, again, a lifelong student of Jung, suggests 3 primary techniques. These is taken from Jung. Journaling, writing down what's going on. Dream work, analyzing and paying attention to our dreams. And a third, maybe a lot less well-known, I think it goes to the heart of two-way prayer, and that is active imagination. Jung developed active imagination. And I came across a quote from him many years ago where he said it was actually more powerful than dream work. And for years when I was addictions counselor, I'd have the patients come up and using active imagination, have them talk to their addiction, tell them what it did to them. Imagine that it's sitting right in front of you, the bottle, the syringe, there it is. It's a personality. It's got a face, maybe fuzzy, you can't see it quite clearly. And maybe it's got a fog all around, doesn't matter. But it's there, and it's sitting in a chair right in front of you. And I'd get the patient to talk to that addiction, tell them what the addiction had done to them, all right? How they'd suffered, and how now they were going to take him on and put him back, beat him at his own game, I'm done with you, never, get the hell out of my life, they'd scream. Sometimes they'd knock over his chair. But then I'd do a shift, and I'd have the addiction talk to the patient. And this is active imagination, where you take on the characteristics, you take on the personality, the persona of the addiction itself. All right. And then you talk to your little self that just read you the riot act and told you to get the hell out of their lives. And you tell him or her how patient you are, how he or she has tried to do this before, and how you're going to get them in the end. And I do this in a group setting, and everybody in the group could feel the power of the addiction. Why is that? It's because this is coming from the unconscious mind. And the ego, if it's got 10 degrees of power, trust me, the unconscious has 100 degrees, 1,000 degrees of greater power. All right? And it's going to wear you down unless you get in touch with a higher power than that. See, I mean, that's what this whole recovery gig is all about. Finding a power that can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. And that power exists within us. We don't care a heck of a lot by what name you call it. What we do care a lot about is whether you connect with it, whether you correct the things that get in the way of it, and whether it directs your life, or if the ego has once again usurped its place within the psyche, the greater personality, the whole self, and is running the show. You got it? So, dream work, active imagination, and observing my life. Write it down in a journal. All of these require discipline, and they require time. And the question you've got to ask is, are you willing to devote the time to this thing? You know, are you willing to give an hour a day, particularly in the morning, to looking inside, to writing, to engaging with these other personalities, to capturing my dreams first thing when I awaken, or else I'm going to lose them? We're just going to dive into these, just touch on them. I don't have time to get into them in depth. Best place, I think, to get started with some of this deeper work is a book called Inner Work by Robert Johnson. I've talked about that before, but it's a nice little primer on what this inner world, this unconscious world is all about, how it operates within our lives. So Inner Work by Robert Johnson. But he does list some questions to be asked. I think they're helpful in terms of reorienting ourselves to what this inner work is all about. He's got 3 questions here. Yes, you know, when you sit down in the morning, when you're doing your step 10, what got touched in me yesterday or today, whenever you're doing it? What got touched? What generated so much energy inside of me? Why did that guy piss me off so much? Because it was disproportionate to the event. All right? But it touched something deep inside. What was that something? Where in me did that energy come from? So that's journaling. That's step 10, watching myself. You know, watching my life, especially my emotional life, when something going on beneath the surface kind of rises above the water. When my response isn't normal. All right? Now, what nerve was hit? And then ask yourself, haven't I been here before? Maybe many times before. And this is where tracking it back to maybe when I was 5 years old or 6 years old or 10 years old, that an event that I've tried to push down, put under the waves, under the water, like a beach ball, push it down there. It's popping up again. What is it? When did it first show up? And that's going to be really helpful. Seeing that it's not about the surface things. It's about the subsurface things are triggering many of these negative emotions that are troubling me so much. I've quoted Tom Powers a time or two in these podcasts. Bill Wilson was his sponsor, and he helped Wilson write the 12 and 12 and some other AA literature. And he said something that just really grabbed me. Had to do with step 10. He said this: if we don't watch, basically when we come to step 11, we won't know what the hell to pray for. So step 10 is watching, feeling, sensing, putting my radar out there. Boop, 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 boop. Is it picking up something going on? Sonar might be a better description, like listening for the submarine, boop, 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 boop. Is it pinging something deep inside of me? All right? What is that thing? And then how do I engage with it? Dreams, I need to write them down. I've done this for many years now. First thing in the morning, when I awake, that's critical time, because that's when I may remember a dream. And if I don't just jot down some notes on that, just enough to remember it, I'm going to lose it. It's going to go away. The ego consciousness will reassert itself and say, that was nonsense. Get rid of that. Let's get the newspaper and read what's going on in the world. No, you got to pay attention to this stuff, and it's not easy, and it takes some time. And finally is the active imagination work, dialoguing, learning how to dialogue with these energies, these inner characters who show up in our dreams. If a character shows up in your dream, you might say, "Who are you? Why did you come to me last night? What is it you represent? What are you trying to tell me?" And the same thing can be done with emotionally charged energies. All right, I'm an obsessive compulsive. I got in touch some years back. I was doing Thanksgiving dinner. I'm getting the turkey going. I got the gravy going. Alcoholic, I'm trying to do this whole damn thing by myself because it's a lazy man's load. I'm carrying, and I can do this thing. If I just stack enough on me, I'll get it done. And I was doing this in the kitchen. Somebody came in and said, "Can I help?" No, I got it. I got this thing. Well, why the hell couldn't I accept help? Why couldn't I distribute the load? And I could see very clearly it was kind of a bottom for me in one regard. It was an opportunity to see beneath the surface. And I could feel that energy, that drivenness. So I gave that drivenness a title. He became a character, so I could dialogue with him. And I called him Atlas, because he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. And so I began going back and forth. And this is what Johnson talks about in his book, Inner Work. How do you dialogue with these characters? How do you allow them to speak to you? Why did you come to me? And what I learned, I'll just kind of give you the down and dirty. When I was 5 or 6 years old, I'm growing up in an alcoholic home, and nobody was responsible. And I'm 5 or 6, and God, somebody's got to be responsible here. And that fell to me. And I took on that challenge. I took on that role. I took on that assignment. Well, how the hell is a 5 or 6 year old or 7-year-old kid gonna do that poorly? Or do it? You try to do it well, but it's gonna come at a cost. It's gonna come at a cost. So what you do in this work, again, I can't go into it in great depth, is that Atlas came to me bearing a gift. He was going to help me. But that was 50 years ago or so when I started doing this. And it's like, okay, you were very helpful when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. But I'm 30, 40, 50 now, whatever it might be. Thanks for your help. And you've really given me a gift, and I mean, if you want to get some crap done, call me. I mean, I'm pretty good at getting it done. But I'm not going to do it at the cost of self. Okay? I'm not going to do it because I have to do it. And quite often I still catch myself, I've been asked to do something, you gotta do it. No, you don't. No, you don't. I don't have to clean up after people, all right? I do it because I'm guided to do it. It's a whole different deal. Thank you, Atlas. Appreciate all the help. But I'm going to be responsible for me now. And I'm going to take care of this kid inside of me. And that's part of inner work, too. Dealing with these different parts. So I like Atlas today. I just don't give him the keys to the car. You follow that? The ego has a role in all of this. And our charge is to grow up and to be responsible, and not allow the unconscious to rule our lives. So let me close with another quote from Hollis. I think it's pretty beautiful. He's a good writer. The boy is a good writer. The guy's 85. He's got a lot of stuff on YouTube. He's done a lot of interviews and things. Recommend him highly. It's good work. He writes this: journaling, active imagination, and dream work are all forms of paying attention, listening to the psyche, the soul, as it manifests, and realizing that some intelligence is there that transcends ordinary ego intelligence. Something seeks to connect with us, something that represents, if you will, the wisdom of nature. Don't get caught up on this God stuff, arguments that are not worth having. There's something. Just put a capital S on that something and then start to deal with it. This idea does not necessarily fit into the informed intelligence of our culture, with which we must deal every day. But it is something that is larger than this time and place. It is willing in some way to risk its investment in us. How dare we then not undertake a journey to that which is seeking expression through us? People say, help me in my search for God. Well, stop the search. God is searching for you. That's what this is saying. God is searching for us. Remove the obstacles, the barriers to that, and get in touch with the mystery. I hope you're catching that. When we do this, he says, it may be a humbling process, but I think it gives a profound sense of personal purpose, depth, and dignity to our journey that no amount of outer accomplishments or recognition by the world can ever equal. It gives that inner conviction that we are living our journey as honestly and as faithfully as we can. All of us, he says, I believe, are invited to that journey and are always equipped by nature for it. And we can thank depth psychology, and specifically the work of Jung, for giving us some of these tools with which to address it. When we do, we will find that the wisdom of the ancients is once again present to each of us. All right, heavy stuff, and maybe not suitable for beginners. Don't drink, go to meetings. That's all very good and probably wise. I don't know that you start them off on shadow work and that. But, maybe 10, 12, 15, in my case, 20 years later, you're into recovery and you start asking, is this all that recovery has to offer? Maybe that's the soul calling us to an accountability, to take the next step on the recovery journey, to listen to God and to listen to our split off parts. I don't believe, this is coming from a priest, right? But I don't believe the aim of recovery is to become holy, holy, holy. I'm convinced the aim of recovery is to become holy, W-H-O-L-L-Y, holy, holy, whole. All right? That's the journey, not to repress, but to bring up to the surface all of the stuff that's in us. And we got some terrible stuff in us. 4th step, 10th step, that's where we deal with much of that. But we've got some wonderful stuff in us too. And we need to dig down and find out what that is, who we really are. And that's more than just being an alcoholic or an addict. That's a child of God, someone in whom God wants to take up residence, and for us to manifest more and more of that God, that goodness, that love, that honesty, that purity, that unselfishness, to manifest that in our lives. Okay? A different take, maybe, than we usually get in 12-step, but I think it's completely compatible with it. So, next episode, Hollis explores 3 essential principles of depth psychology, and I hope you come back, and I will again try to break this stuff down as best I can. Until then, I want to thank everybody for listening. God bless. Keep coming back.